The papers slid across the dinner table like a silent declaration of war. My mother's manicured fingers tapped them once, as if sealing my fate. "Sign this," she said softly, too softly. "It's just a formality. Your sister will oversee your clinic operations from now on. She'll receive 25% of all profits. It's for the family." The fork in my hand froze midair. My clinic. My blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. And they were handing it away like a birthday present. My father leaned back, watching me, waiting for compliance. My sister smirked like she'd already moved into my office. I forced my breath to remain steady. My name is Claire Reynolds. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? I lifted the papers, scanning the dense legal jargon that reeked of betrayal. I saw the hours of work they wanted to erase. The independence they wanted to strip from me. The woman they wanted to silence. Then, slowly, I reached for my leather briefcase. Their smiles faltered. Inside, neatly organized, was everything I had prepared for this moment, because I already knew my parents would try this, and I was ready. The candlelight flickered against my face as I pulled out a single stapled document, flipped to clause 4.3, and slid it across the table. My father's hand trembled when his eyes fell on it. His jaw tightened. My sister leaned over, confused. "What's that?" I leaned back, calm. "Proof that the clinic isn't yours to take." And just like that, I watched my father freeze. The silence around the table was sharp enough to cut through bone. My father's hand hovered above the clause like it burned him. "Clause 4.3, I repeated, my voice steady. "It states that no transfer of management or profit distribution can occur without the founder's explicit consent. That founder is me." My sister's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of disbelief. She glanced at my mother for backup, but Mom's expression faltered too. You added that?" My father muttered. His voice cracked in a way I had never heard before. "No," I said. "I anticipated you. That's the difference. The truth is, when I opened my clinic 2 years ago, I had hired my own attorney, quietly, secretly, without telling a soul in my family. I buried protections in the foundation of my contracts like hidden landmines. And tonight, they had stepped on one. My sister slammed her palm on the table. "This isn't fair, Claire. You always think you're better than us. Dad and Mom only want what's best for the family." I tilted my head, watching her unravel. "Best for the family, or best for you?" The words hung between us like smoke. My mother finally spoke, her tone sharp. "Enough games, Claire. You owe us. We raised you, we supported you, and now it's time you give back. Family sacrifices for family." I laughed, low, bitter, unrecognizable even to myself. Funny. Because when I was drowning in student loans, when I worked 80-hour weeks, when I ate ramen for months just to afford my rent, where was that family sacrifice? The silence thickened. My father's face hardened, the mask of patriarchal control settling back over him. "You will sign these documents," he ordered, and that's when I knew. This wasn't about family. This was about power. My hands didn't shake. Instead, I gathered their papers, folded them neatly, and slid them back across the table. "I won't sign," I said simply. My sister lunged forward, her voice shrill. "You'll regret this. Do you think patients come to your clinic for you? No, they come because of our family name." The lie hit me like acid, and deep inside, a vow began to form, slow, precise, and lethal. They wanted a war? Then I'd give them one. But on my terms. They thought the freeze was temporary. They thought shock would bend me back into the shape they liked. Instead, it lit something in me that had been waiting, patient, cold, and exact. The next morning the clinic hummed with its usual rhythm, the soft beep of monitors, the murmur of receptionists, the careful footsteps of nurses. My hands moved through those motions like a surgeon's, precise, unerring. I greeted patients, reviewed charts, answered calls. Every normal thing I did was a small rebellion. At noon my office door cracked open. Emma, my office manager, stood in the doorway, her smile tight. "You have 2 new referrals," she said. Her eyes flicked to the stack of glossy brochures on her tablet, my sister's smiling face on the front of a flyer promising family-focused care. My heart did a slow, hot flip. "Who printed those?" I asked. Emma swallowed. "A marketing firm. They said they were contracted by, she glanced at the hallway as if afraid someone would overhear, by your parents. Heat spread across my neck. They weren't stopping at dinner room theatrics. They were trying to erode me, patient by patient, appointment by appointment. They were seeding my practice with doubt. I called an emergency staff meeting in the break room. The fluorescent lights felt harsh, naked. I want honesty, I said. If anyone's been approached by my family, by my sister, tell me now. A silence fell like snowfall. Then Maria, a nurse with steady hands and tired eyes, raised a trembling hand. They offered me a promotion, she said quietly. More money, but I'd have to transfer to the new family-managed branch. It was elegant, the way they were dismantling me, not by blows, but by offers, strings tied with velvet. Money that smelled like compromise. Loyalty priced and parceled. You don't have to make a decision today, I told Maria. But understand this clinic isn't hardware you can unplug and rewire. It's trust. And trust takes years to build. It can collapse in a night. She nodded, and I saw the war in her pupils, the tug between rent and loyalty. Between a paycheck and the person who'd fought for her when others wouldn't. I remembered those nights of paying staff out of my own pocket. I remembered signing leases and buying equipment while living off oatmeal and determination. When the meeting dispersed, I found a file tucked under my keyboard, an anonymous note. Sign the papers or patients will be redirected. We can make your life harder, Claire. No name. Just a threat in polite handwriting. They were moving like predators now, testing corners of my life to see which would crumble first. I could call my lawyer again, drag them into court, make a scene. But I am not a woman who wins by yelling into a courtroom while my life is picked apart in the waiting room. I win by quiet, immovable measures. So I started tracing the breadcrumbs. Who printed the flyers? Who called my staff? Who redirected patients? Each phone number was a thread. I pulled one and found another. I pulled another and felt the whole weave loosened. At dusk I stood in the clinic parking lot, watching the streetlights bloom one by one. My sister's car glinted across the road, a pale shell in the evening. She was with my mother, laughing, the familiar sound I used to think meant safety. Now it sounded brittle. I placed my palm against the cool windshield of my own car and whispered something I had never said aloud. No demands, no promises, only a fact. You picked the wrong sister to cross. That night I opened my laptop and began to write, not a letter, not a legal brief, but a ledger. Names, dates, calls, payments, promises. Evidence grows like a garden if you tend it. And I had time, and I had patience, and I had a memory that refused to forget. They wanted to make me small. Instead, I catalogued every attempt to do so. Every lie would eventually have to answer for itself. Outside, a siren wailed, distant, anonymous. Inside, I planted my next move, and by the time sleep found me, it brought with it a plan with teeth. They answered my silence with a new kind of violence, paperwork, favors, and invisible strings pulled in rooms I couldn't enter. The clinic schedule began to fray like an old rope, double bookings, cancelled referrals, and a whisper campaign that painted me as cold, as difficult. As the sort of doctor who cared more about ego than people. I watched it happen the way you watch a storm approach, slow at first, then sudden and merciless. My waiting room, once full of familiar faces and anxious smiles, began to thin. A mother who'd trusted me with her newborn's health now hesitated at the receptionist's nod. An elderly man who hugged my hand at discharge refused to look me in the eye. The loss was surgical, precise, intimate. At noon a reporter called, curious, sharp. We heard there's a family dispute at your clinic, he said. Is there any truth to allegations that the practice is mismanaged? His tone was a blade wrapped in silk. I could hear my parents' names in every pause. I told him nothing. I spoke the truth in small pieces and saved the rest for evidence. Words are currency. I wasn't going to spend them on rumors. By 3 I had a summons on my desk, an injunction filed by a law firm my sister had never used before. It arrived like a challenge, formal and perfumed, demanding immediate mediation. They wanted to freeze assets, to make headlines, to prove my unwillingness to cooperate. Their lawyers were lean and practiced. Their letters smelled of other people's money. Instead of panicking, I called one of my older patients, Mr. Adler, who'd been a judge before retirement. He came in that afternoon with the slow dignity of someone who'd seen too many human negotiations end in small, pointless tragedies. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You didn't build this for them to take, Claire. You built this for the people who need it." He handed me a worn notebook, his life's appointments, like a talisman. "Keep serving. Let the truth accumulate." So I did exactly that. I held the clinic open like a lighthouse, steady light, predictable hours. I reopened files, followed up on missed appointments, and personally called every patient who'd been redirected. Many answers were simple: confusion, apologies, tears. Some were harder: resentment, betrayal, debts the clinic had quietly absorbed that now looked like mine alone. That night I slipped into my sister's social feed, not to smear her, not to gloat, but to collect photos of charity galas, smiling donors, captions about family dedication and women supporting women. Under one image, a local philanthropist commented about a new 5-figure donation, earmarked for community expansion. The donor's name matched a corporate partner my parents had bragged about at last week's dinner. I traced the gift. The money wasn't charity. It was leverage made pretty. Donations that looked like goodwill could be redirected into contracts, board seats, and control. Their generosity was a scaffold with ropes aimed at my neck. I sat back and let a slow, cold clarity settle in. They were building an empire of influence around my clinic: boards, benefactors, PR, and then they would claim it was for stability. But stability, like consent, is earned. You don't buy it. You earn it with trust and care and long, boring nights. You don't steal it by paying people to forget. So I found the donor's accountant. I found the contracts behind the charity dinners. I called every vendor who'd quietly signed new terms. I filled 3 legal pads with cross-references and contradictions. Every smile in their gala photos had a receipt. Every donation had a clause. Their strategy was elegant: make the world believe the clinic needed them. My counter-strategy would be uglier and truer. I started contacting the families who'd been redirected, not with speeches, but with facts. Receipts. Testimonials. Names and timestamps. I turned kindness into armor: personal calls, follow-up visits. A free clinic day for those abandoned by the new family initiative. They came, confused and grateful, and slowly the tide shifted. Late one night, after bandaging a child's scraped knee and persuading a worried father to keep his follow-up appointment with me, I stood outside the clinic under sodium lights. The city smelled of hot asphalt and promise. My phone buzzed, another anonymous message: "You can't stop what's coming." Typeless threats are like fog, intimidating until you walk through them. I put the phone away and laughed. Quietly, the kind of laugh that loosens a knot. They had money, connections, and names to throw around. I had truth, and I had people whose lives I had touched. Those things are heavier than cash when the ledger is finally opened. I closed the clinic doors and flipped the sign, "Open." The light in the window felt smaller after the turmoil, but it burned relentless. And somewhere inside that light, a new plan sketched itself, one that would make their money look cheap and their power look small. Tonight, I slept with the notebook of names beside my bed. It's hard to sleep when you're making war, but easier when you remember who you are fighting for. The damage came in a slow, careful drip, a scheduler's hiccup that became an emergency when an elderly patient's medication refill was delayed. The pharmacy called me at dawn, voice tight: "We never received the authorization." A paper trail I'd never seen had rerouted prescriptions to another practice. One life or death form, folded into the wrong pile. When I walked into the consultation room and met Mr. Hargrove's hollow eyes, something in me went still and animal. He trusted me with his pulse and his quiet stories about his wife. He trusted me to remember. The fact that someone had tried to erase him from my ledger felt like a personal assault. I moved faster than panic. I called the pharmacy, pulled digital logs, traced IPs, timestamps, names. Every bureaucratic misdirection has fingerprints if you look close enough. The logs led to an outsourced billing company, one with a contract signed the week after the dinner. The signature matched the same law firm that filed the injunction. That afternoon, a technician arrived with a scanner and a smile. "Routine maintenance," he said. He stayed longer than necessary and left with a USB drive that hadn't been there before. By evening my patient portal sputtered and glitched. Appointment confirmations vanished into digital dust. It wasn't subtle. It was sabotage with a white collar. I called Emma, my office manager, and asked her to pull every backup, every hard copy, every invoice. We rebuilt patient records by hand like archivists resurrecting a burned library. Nurses copied charts. Receptionists printed lists. We worked past midnight, the clinic glowing like an island of stubborn light. "You're going to expose them," Emma whispered when at last we sat in the break room, exhausted and wired. Her hands trembled around a styrofoam cup. "You can't fight their money without getting eaten alive." I looked at her, at the faces lined with loyalty and fear, and felt an answer rise inside me that wasn't about revenge for its own sake. "This isn't a fight about money," I said. "It's a fight about people who trusted us. If we lose that, the rest means nothing." The next day I started cutting corners they hadn't anticipated. I hired a cybersecurity consultant, small, local, someone with gentle eyes and the patience of a locksmith. He taught me about backdoors and ghost accounts. We sealed what they'd opened, and in the cracks we planted things that would make it harder for them to pretend innocence: timestamps, redundant backups, witness statements on voicemail, notarized attestations from staff. Every scrap of manipulation we found, we saved twice. At the same time I turned my ledger into a weapon of truth. I met with families in coffee shops and church basements. I listened. I recorded. Each testimony became a stitch in a fabric that would be impossible to deny. Old Mr. Adler sent me a letter that smelled of tobacco and law books. He offered his name as a witness. A pediatrician friend, Dr. Karen Liu, sent a statement about referral irregularities. Even small vendors, linen suppliers, lab couriers, admitted pressure from a third party to change terms. Little confessions slipped out when money made people ashamed. They escalated by going public. A local news blog ran a piece with a headline that painted the dispute as a family disagreement over clinic management. The article quoted an anonymous source, my sister's PR handler, suggesting I was resisting sensible stewardship. It was designed to make me look selfish. To make donors uncomfortable. So I gave the reporter something he couldn't argue with: facts. I sent scanned contracts, bank transfers, invoice trails that painted a different story. I named names with calm precision. I didn't scream. I presented a dossier. The editor called back, voice careful: "If this is true, Claire, this changes everything." Meanwhile, threats took a darker tone. A car keyed across the street. Tires slashed. A note tucked under my windshield wiper: "Sign or lose everything." The handwriting was deliberate, like someone practicing cruelty. Fear is a tool. I learned to recognize it and put it in a jar. I stopped sleeping in my apartment 2 nights a week and spent them at the clinic, where a night nurse and I kept vigil. We made the building feel watched by kindness. There's power in presence. Predators avoid light. Late one evening, as rain rimmed the windows, I walked the clinic halls alone. I passed framed graduation photos and thank you notes pinned to corkboards. I touched each one like a promise. For every smear they threw at me, I put a person's face back on the wall, and in the dim glow of the waiting room, a new plan took shape: not cinematic fireworks or petty sabotage, but a slow, public unspooling of truth that would make the gilded scaffolding they'd built look brittle. I would not beat them with equal violence. I would beat them with clarity. I folded the threat note and slid it into the ledger beside Mr. Hargrove's chart. Paper has a way of keeping secrets until someone reads them aloud. I intended to read them aloud, in full. Outside, the rain stopped. And the world smelled like clean paper and something like hope. The morning the town noticed. I wore the same sweater I'd worn for late-night charting, soft wool, coffee-stained at the cuff. There was no armor in designer suits. There was armor in work clothes and a calendar full of patients' names. I posted the open clinic announcement at dawn: free consultations, records review, and a town meeting at 5. No press release, just truth and an open door. By midday the waiting room hummed like a church on Sunday. People I'd taught to trust doctors now trusted me again because I had shown up for them when it mattered. I signed forms, cleared backlogs, and handed families notarized copies of statements I'd collected. Each signature was a small reclamation. A local blogger arrived, breathless with a camera, and I let him record. I didn't perform. I answered. I named the law firm, the donor, the vendor changes. I showed the timestamps. I laid out the ledger like a map of their attempts to buy control. When I spoke, I did not plead. I documented. At 3, my phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Adler, be at the county hearing room at 4. I made a call. He'd used his old contacts. The ones that still remembered a man of law rather than a man of leisure. By 4 the county council chambers smelled like sweat and coffee and paper, human things that cannot be outsourced. I stood before a room of neighbors. A handful of reporters, and a councilwoman with a clipboard whose face watched me like a jury. I did what I'd practiced in the dark, factual clarity, no flourish. I read call logs, supplier invoices, the charity's redirect notes. I played voicemails of receptionists coerced into changing referrals. I handed the councilwoman a thumb drive filled with everything. She held it like an offering. My sister sat in the back row, small in a cocktail dress that did not belong to the world we were in. She mouthed something to our mother, who sat with her knitting of faux concern. When the councilwoman asked if anyone had statements, Mr. Adler rose with the slow authority of an old judge. He spoke for the people I'd served. He spoke for the law. He spoke for a ledger that had teeth. By the time the council room emptied, the injunction had been put on hold pending an audit. It wasn't a victory so much as a pause, a legal space where truth could breathe. They'd expected me to crumble in public. Instead, they watched me hand my clinic's fate to the people whose lives it touched. That evening, at a fundraiser where my parents were draped in donated silk and handshakes, my sister found me outside on a balcony lit by string lights. The city spread below, tiny lives that had come back to me that day. You made us look like monsters, she said, voice low enough to be private. I made you visible, I corrected. There's a difference. Her eyes glistened, not with contrition so much as calculation. You could have been family, she said. You could have done the honorable thing. The honorable thing isn't stolen control, I said. It's consent. I watched her for a moment, really watched her, the way you look at someone before a train crosses the tracks. She laughed then, a brittle thing. You think you're righteous? You think you can stand alone? I don't stand alone, I told her. I stand with everyone who needs care that isn't a commodity. I thought of Mr. Hargrove's haunted eyes. Of Maria's trembling hand, of every nurse who'd stayed when easy money called. She turned away. And for a sliver of a second I saw the child she used to be, dirt on her knees, an earnest grin, my hand in hers. Then the moment slipped and the social host called her back. And she walked like a woman who had rehearsed every step. When I got home that night, wet from rain and a little hollow from the near victory, there was an envelope taped to my door. No return address. Inside, a Polaroid of 2 little girls on a summer porch, one with a chipped tooth, one with pigtails. I'd kept that picture once. I'd lost it in a move years ago. On the back, in my sister's handwriting, one sentence, you always took things so seriously. Anger rose, quick and hot. But beneath it, something older and quieter settled, an ache that was not strategic but real. Families are messy, and sometimes the people you fight are the people who once loved you without guarantee. I slid the photo into the ledger beside the threat note and the invoices. Paper keeps company. So do memories. The ledger was becoming a strange artifact of my life, part evidence, part history, part confession. Tonight, with the city quieter and the clinic files backed up in 3 places, I slept with the Polaroid under my pillow. It didn't soften my resolve. If anything, it sharpened it, because revenge without restoration is hollow, and I wanted both. Outside, the string lights on the balcony blinked like a faraway heartbeat. Inside, I closed my eyes and let the list of names I'd sworn to protect hum me into a brittle sleep. The audit became a mirror they couldn't control. Numbers don't bow to family names. Paper trails don't care about old reputations. For weeks, investigators walked through my clinic with clipboards and scanners, their quiet presence turning every waiting room into a courtroom. My parents' lawyers tried to stall, tried to spin, tried to reduce sabotage into clerical errors. But truth, when documented, doesn't vanish. Meanwhile, the clinic lived. Patients came back, timid at first, then steady. The walls hummed again with the sounds I had built it for: coughs, laughter, a child's shriek when a cold stethoscope touched skin. Each sound was a declaration: we choose you. But the war wasn't over. One evening, I came home to find my apartment door cracked open, Inside, drawers were pulled out, files scattered, my ledger gone. My chest locked, but then I saw it, tucked neatly back on my desk, untouched except for one new page slid inside. A photocopy of my own handwriting, with a single line underlined, "You picked the wrong sister to cross." They wanted me rattled. They wanted me to question what was mine and what could be stolen. Instead, I called the investigator assigned to my case and handed her the new page. "Add it to the file," I said. My voice was steel. If they wanted to play ghosts in my own home, then I would force those ghosts into the light. The next day, the council called a public hearing. My family was summoned, the community invited. The chamber filled with neighbors, patients, vendors, all the people who had been tugged by invisible strings. I stood at the front, documents stacked high, while my sister arrived in pearl earrings and a blazer that screamed borrowed confidence. My parents flanked her, their faces masks of righteous indignation. The hearing began with questions. Easy ones at first. Then sharper. The councilwoman asked about redirected referrals, about donations disguised as contracts, about the family-managed branch that had siphoned patients without consent. My father's answers slipped into rehearsed platitudes. My mother's eyes darted. My sister's voice shook when she called it all a misunderstanding. Then I opened my ledger, page by page. I read the anonymous threats, the sabotaged prescriptions, the voicemails from staff pressured to defect. Mr. Adler stood, frail but steady, and confirmed what I had said. Maria testified too, voice breaking as she spoke of the promotion offer that came with betrayal as fine print. Vendors came forward with invoices and signatures. The chamber shifted. The audience leaned in, and then I pulled out the photo, the Polaroid of two little girls. I held it up. "This," I said softly, "was left on my doorstep last week. It's me and my sister. I kept this once because it meant family. Now it was left as a weapon. Do you understand what it feels like when your own blood turns your history into a threat?" My sister's face went white. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she had no script. Silence spread across the chamber, thick and undeniable. My voice cut through it. "You don't just steal clinics. You steal trust. You steal care. And when you do, you don't just betray me, you betray every patient who ever believed in us." The council adjourned with promises of rulings, but the verdict was already painted across the room. Whispers turned to nods, nods turned to stares aimed at my parents, at my sister. They had walked in with power. They left with eyes on their backs. That night, I walked past my clinic windows. The lights glowed like they were alive, stubborn against the dark. Inside, I saw Emma at the desk, flipping through charts. She caught sight of me through the glass, raised her hand, and smiled, and for the first time in months, I let myself breathe, but I knew the final act hadn't come yet. Justice is slow. Like medicine, it has to be prepared, dosed, and delivered carefully. Tomorrow, I would give the last dose, and it would be irreversible. The ruling came on a Thursday morning, quiet as a scalpel. I sat in the courthouse, the weight of months pressing into my shoulders, the ledger balanced on my lap like scripture. The council's decision was unanimous, the injunction void, my ownership affirmed. And a recommendation for investigation into fraudulent practices tied to the so-called family branch. My father didn't move. My mother's lips pressed into a bloodless line. My sister whispered something sharp and panicked into her lawyer's ear, but no one listened. Their empire of contracts and smiles collapsed in a single paragraph of legal language. Outside, the reporters swarmed. Microphones flashed like bayonets. "Dr. Reynolds, what does this mean for you?" I didn't posture. I didn't gloat. I said only this: it means the clinic belongs to the people who need it. And it always will. That night, I held a town hall inside the clinic itself. The waiting room was too small for the crowd, so people spilled into the hallways, pressed shoulder to shoulder. Patients I'd treated years ago stood beside new faces, all of them carrying the quiet power of solidarity. I read a final statement, short, precise. I thanked them. I promised them that their trust was my only inheritance worth keeping. Halfway through, Maria slipped me a folded paper. It was the audit's addendum, evidence of misappropriated funds, falsified signatures, and coercion. Not just attempts, but crimes. The words were clinical, but their weight was thunder. My family hadn't just tried to take my clinic, they had broken the law to do it. I stood taller. The truth doesn't need me to scream it, I said. It speaks in receipts, in signatures, in every life you tried to touch with greed. And now it speaks louder than you. Applause erupted, raw, unpracticed, like a heartbeat rediscovered. For the first time, the clinic felt not just like a workplace but like a fortress of memory and loyalty. Later, when the crowd thinned and the night nurse reset the rooms, I sat alone at my desk. The ledger lay open in front of me. I slipped the Polaroid between the last pages, not as evidence, not as a threat, but as history. A reminder that betrayal can be written in the same hand that once held yours. I closed the book, locked it away, and exhaled. Justice had been delivered, not with shouting, but with patience sharpened into precision. My family had taught me betrayal. My patience had taught me resilience. And together, those lessons forged something stronger than revenge, clarity. I walked through the clinic one last time that night, touching each doorframe, each chart, each reminder that healing is never just medicine, it's a vow. When I turned the key and stepped into the cool night air, I whispered a single word to the empty street: